Emil, thank you so much for joining me. I really wanted to start with this question. What should Canadians know about hosting their website and their email within Canada?
Uh, well, first off, thank you for having me, Amber. Great to be on the show. Happy to be contributing to a conversation about what it would take to make and help Canadians succeed online and help Canadians choose Canadian solutions and Canadian providers for some of the services that they're using on a day-to-day. So, good question. What does it mean to have to be hosted and to have your email, your website in Canada, and how can you make that happen as a either an individual or small business that has an online presence. A lot of different elements, but primarily I would say, and as simply put as we can, is choosing a Canadian provider that will actually host your data in Canada. So, what makes up a digital infrastructure, what makes up a website are primarily three things. And I'm sure that if you've been in the tech world for ages, so, we're talking about network, we're talking about compute, and we're talking about data. That data needs to live somewhere, regardless of how you want to think about your cloud or how you want to think about the technology that delivers that content. Your data ultimately lives somewhere. It's in a place. For Canadians doing business online, more often than not, and sometimes without them even realizing, they're using American providers, which would have been fine and dandy a few years ago, despite there also being many legal implications of doing that. But in today's day and age, with everything we're seeing around tariffs, everything we're seeing around just national sovereignty, but even data sovereignty, it becomes more and more important to have your data close and to support businesses that are doing and operating within Canada. So, as far as websites are concerned, it's all about choosing a provider that will actually house your data on Canadian soil in Canadian data centers that will power its business through Canadian locations that will ideally register and manage domain names through their Canadian infrastructure, and that will hire Canadians to help and operate that business. So this is where I think a business like WHC, Canadian founded and operated since 2003, can help. It can help you build a website out here in Canada, host it using a variety of different software, including WordPress and other open source content management systems right here in Canada, and help support you with all of the tooling and initiatives and services that you might need to make that website a success. And I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to sort of draw a parallel between how a story of how you've actually evolved your website since inception, an opportunity to take it down a little bit down memory lane and showcase sort of the AmberMac.com and .ca story going from 2004, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it. I will say this was not rehearsed or anything. So I have no idea what direction this is going in. I do have someone on my team who manages this. So I am super excited to hear this because I think it will help people really reinforce your point of a lot of people maybe haven't been thinking about this over the years. And it's not something that maybe they've thought about even revisiting over the past few months. So let's take that journey when it comes to my website.
Okay, let's do it. So we're going to channel your inner 2004 Amber Mac, assuming the screen sharing's popping up on your screen.
Got
Do
it.
you remember this?
I really do remember that. And I was so proud of that. I worked with a guy named Tony, I think, on that design. It felt very fresh and modern at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of us that have been in the business for a while, these are all elements that kind of remind you of specific points in time, fonting, the template, the styling, the design approach. But this story, at least your story, Amber, with regards to your website, started in 2004. It was actually in August of 2004 that you've registered your first .com, AmberMac.com. Well, not your first .com, but rather AmberMac.com. the .ca followed many years later. I would say 2021 was when you registered the .ca variant, currently redirects to your .com. But in 2004, this is how it started. Fast forward a few years, there might have been a few transitions in between, but fast forward in a few years brings us back to 2011. That's where I like to think the AmberMac took Avril Lavigne turn. You kind of rock in the Avril Lavigne style and a lot more content centric. You're already showcasing some of your publications, obviously power friending, your speaking events, some shows. You've got an RSS feed, quite popular back then as well, and you're exposing some dynamic functionality like search, etc., and encouraging others to follow you. Fast forwarding again, 2014, now we've got embedded video. You're showcasing videos, pre-recorded videos that are streaming sort of throughout the background, kind of creating a more engaging experience. Still content focused. You're sort of simplifying your homepage, trying to get, I'm assuming, a more concerted and focused messaging through the website. You can see the social elements on the right. You're using some social channels that were popular back then, including Google Plus, Pinterest, I think Vimeo, LinkedIn, and some of these no, that's the old Twitter and Instagram icons as well. So pushing that forward. And until finally settling into maybe a template or a look that you recognize a little bit more since 2016, early 2017, AmberMac is now sort of gotten this, I would call it these different little snippets, your feeds, again, content rich, where you're focusing on recent posts, a mixed type of content, including video, audio, uh, categorized in different blogs and different sections with an embedded Facebook feed, kind of carries us over into 2024, where this content still lives today. So I'm going to stop the sharing. But what's interesting about seeing sort of an evolution of a website, especially for a media personality like yourself, where it is your personal brand, is how it is a reflection, of yourself, how you choose to portray yourself, and how you choose to present information, and that trend evolves over time. And what's nice about being able to have that full autonomy through a website, as opposed to, let's say, a social media platform like Facebook, Instagram, video, YouTube, where you obviously also do a lot of publications. That's probably your core, right? Where when you think of, where is it that you're going to get seen? Most of it is across your social media platforms. But what I love about being able to publish and update and use websites is really that you have full control. You can choose to do whatever you want. It's really a reflection of sort of the time, the energy, and sort of the creative uh, part of how you want to display that brand, how you want to display that organization or your personal project. And so, and why I was using this example, other than obviously taking us down memory lane, is to also highlight some of the things that I would say we don't often think about when when we're working through a website, because we're so focused on, building something good and making it look great. But what goes in behind the scenes? And so this is where I brought up, that there behind the scenes, there's so many moving parts. There's a .com domain, there's a .ca domain, there is a hosting account. So, ambermac.com is, with and this is, I'm not doing this to call you out on it. I'm doing this to kind of just bring to the attention how we're making everyday choices that in 2025 we might want to reconsider. AmberMac.com, for example, being registered with an American provider. AmberMac.ca, registered in Canada with a Canadian provider, redirecting to the American version. The .com is hosted in the US with an American provider, an American CDN, on an IP address shared by 500 plus other websites, also likely in the US. Content appears to be served yet by another provider, also American-based. I'm not going to call out on any specific brands, but just to give a sense, that the amount of different providers sort of involved in that chain of services needed to ultimately render or service a website such as ambermac.com. the DNS services are hosted through a subsidiary of the American providers that are actually based in Germany. And the website itself hosted through an open source platform, WordPress, which I congratulate you on. I think open source is a great initiative and a great way to encourage creators and encourage and use software that you're not tied into using with this particular provider. It's running a slightly outdated version, but that's okay. WordPress 6.8 having just come out not too long ago. These are normal everyday things that website users will power their websites through and update them regularly. So some of the joys of having your website is keeping it up to date. So just kind of wanted to bring it back to just highlight some of those elements that go into the websites that we use, the service providers that we use, and how while it's not maybe the natural reflex to sort of think about where those different pieces live, there is an option. There is an option out there to have them live with a Canadian provider and to bring them in to a Canadian provider, such as WHC, but there's so many others out there as well that can do what we do.
Okay, so first of all, I love this because I think this is just a perfect example. And I think when people are watching or listening, they may be thinking about their own website and may not even realize sort of the complex history of where they're hosted because maybe like me, it was many, many years ago and you just haven't revisited it. So just one or two more questions for you in terms of people who want to make that switch, myself included. So what is involved in actually making that switch so you do actually choose someone like WHC to host your website right here in Canada?
Right. So the answer I would give you was probably applies to, I would say, 80% of the people out there. Obviously, a website can be something very simple, can be something extremely complex. Where you've built your website or how you've built your website plays a part. But I would say for 80% of the people listening to this podcast and possibly, AmberMac.com included, this migration or this move would be simple in that you choose a service provider, you make sure they're trustworthy and they're capable, and then their team actually does that transfer or provides you with self-serve tools that makes it easy for you to do yourself. In the case of WHC, it's literally as simple as ordering the service you need, transferring the domain over, and the website component is taken on by our team of experts who do the migration for you, often in a matter of an hour or two. Obviously, again, depends on the complexity of the website. Maybe a website of the magnitude of AmberMac.com, a lot more content there to move over. But the process is generally straightforward, especially for using a type of website like one powered by software like WordPress, open source software, where we have actually access to the data. This type of move is straightforward. So for those of you for some of the listeners out there that are concerned about, I don't have the time, I don't have the mental capacity to worry about something like moving a website over, we can reassure them by saying it's actually easier than you might think. And if it's not feasible or if it's not doable, we'll let you know straight off the bat, so you don't have to start going in circles for nothing.
Okay, so first of all, this is one of the best interviews I've ever done because I love that you just, you came with the receipts, as the kids say, and there's lots of meat here to talk about in terms of making that switch, which I am absolutely going to do because you've just walked me through how easy that is. But one final question for you: can you just talk for a second about a couple of other reasons that you may want to do this, but I'd also love to know about some of the costs involved, because I'm sure for small business owners, which is a lot of our audience, they may be thinking, okay, well, sometimes it's more expensive to choose Canadian tech providers. So walk us through that last piece, like, again, reinforce why this makes sense and what's the cost of doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, why this makes sense, there are multiple reasons. We like to think at WHC that we are the one of the best service providers to cater to your website's needs. So it would make sense just because you're going to get a best-in-class experience at just like an insane value point. So you're probably I invite you to check out WHC.ca to kind of see the services available and the price points. But in terms of why you would want to switch over to a Canadian service provider, in addition to the the obvious context of today being, tariffs, moving away from American service providers, reinvesting in the Canadian economy, supporting Canadian service provider. There's also factors like the environment. In Canada, we have one of these rare benefits. We're blessed to be able to operate on a grid that is powered by hydroelectrical power, pretty much coast to coast. So we actually operate most of our data centers through 100% hydroelectric electricity. And that means that your website isn't contributing to global warming, at least not in any of the ways that some of those American data centers powered by coal or fossil fuels are. We also use technology that leverages water cooling as opposed to air conditioning. So just overall, the general power usage from the infrastructure that powers your websites and your digital infrastructure, including domains and servers, is much less. And again, you're supporting a Canadian team that hires Canadian workers, that operates Canadian infrastructure, all while keeping your data protected by Canadian law. And that is actually a very significant point because, unfortunately, when you host your data in the US, or even you host your data with a US provider, even if that data resides in Canada, you're actually subject to the US Cloud Act, which gives the American government very long reach into being able to look at, seize, and manipulate your data sort of as they please. Obviously, there's some legal oversight. It's just in today's environment, political environment, there's so much uncertainty with what's going on in the US that this has become a very scary thing, especially for businesses that have interests that are also uh, uh, of interest to the American government. Um, so that's just one of the many reasons that you would want to go with get your data hosted in Canada or use a provider that keeps your digital assets out in Canada.
So I have learned a lot from you, and I so appreciate that. So again, it's an easy switch to make. It is in many ways. I'm going to use the word safer in the sense of the data piece that you just walked us through, and lots of pricing options over at WHC.ca as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of in terms of uh, I'd want to maybe just stress on a closing note that in addition to getting your digital infrastructure out here in Canada, in addition to getting your domain names out here in Canada, I would encourage every Canadian to think and consider some of the purchasing choices they're making over the course of this year. Um, just take a moment and reflect on what it is you're buying and where that thing is coming from, and then just educate yourself. Look around, ask friends on what the options are available, because I feel like sometimes you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised by what you find and what's available out there and the quality of what's available out there. I see a lot of sometimes I don't know if it's Canada bashing, but we underestimate ourselves, I find quite often, and I think Canada's actually built a pretty thriving ecosystem in tech and in business in general, and we sometimes don't give ourselves enough credit for it. So I encourage you and your listeners to take that extra time next time they're purchasing their next dollar with a new vendor on a new service to just look at what's out there, and where possible and where it makes sense, choose a Canadian provider, choose a Canadian service, and opt for something local that's closer to you.
I love this. I will make sure that my team calls your team and we get this sorted right away. And I really wanted to thank you so much for joining me today on the AmberMac Show and walking me through all these details. Super important, again, especially for all the entrepreneurs and small business owners in Canada who do want to choose Canadian and maybe didn't have a chance to think about this aspect of their business. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Amber. Really appreciate it.